I knew almost nothing about Materialists before I went into the theater, and the few things I did know were enough to convince me to buy a ticket. You have Dakota Johnson, Pedro Pascal, and Chris Evans all being directed by Celine Song, who made what is argued to be one of the best movies of the decade so far in Past Lives. And I am definitely one of those people that thinks it's as good as everyone hypes it up to be. It is easily one of the best directional debuts of the century so far, and I think about the ending all the time. And even though I wasn't too worried that Celine Song was going to be a one-hit wonder, that fear is still in the back of your mind when you watch a movie as good as Past Lives. It really makes you wonder if she kind of just caught lightning in a bottle in the moment, and that would be the only movie she makes that's actually great. And in her defense, if Past Lives was the only great thing that Celine Song contributed to cinematic history, that's better than most of the people that have a whole career in Hollywood. But the level of pressure on somebody to deliver 2 times in a row, especially when it's your sophomore film, is a pretty high level, especially when the first film is considered to be pretty much an instant classic in the genre. And I try my best to avoid trailers as much as humanly possible. Like, somebody like me tries to see every single major release, so there's really no point in me spoiling certain scenes ahead of time. So I knew the context of the trailer was framing this in a rom-com kind of way. I just never watched the trailer, so I didn't have any context of the story going on or if any of the jokes were actually funny. The most I knew was seeing the poster of the 3 and being like, okay, it's gonna be some sort of love triangle that we've seen a million times before. But when your name is Celine Song, I'm going out of my way to see the first screening I possibly can for your new movie. And in my opinion, I think she delivered on what she set out to do. This is one of the best movies of 2025 so far. Now, a lot of people will ask, is it as good as Past Lives? And the short answer is no, but a lot of movies don't even sniff being as good as a movie like that. And based off a lot of the more negative reactions I've seen to the movie, I think a lot of people either just wanted Past Lives again or a straight up rom-com. And if I were playing devil's advocate here, I could understand the perspective of somebody saying this is a bad rom-com because it's not a rom-com. The story is set up like a generic 2000s romantic genre movie because you have Dakota Johnson playing this matchmaking consultant whose main job is to connect people based on their dating interests. But then she has to come to terms with the kind of person she wants to be with. Either the really hot ex that she loved but had to leave because he was super poor, or the really hot new rich guy that is obsessed with her. A really hard choice to make in 2025. This is not a groundbreaking idea by any means, but the way Celine Song writes makes it so engaging from start to finish. And it all starts with the main character of Lucy, who I think is a genius archetype to build a movie about modern dating around, because you have this woman whose main job is to review dating candidates and break them down into a stat sheet on a piece of paper that she can pitch to other stat sheets. And this is a concept I think a lot of other writers would do well with, but Celine Song just maximizes the entire potential of the idea. She just strikes me as a storyteller that gets it. She is always on top of it. She's always going to think things through ahead of time. And while there is a hint of optimism in both this and Past Lives, I think when she leans into the more pessimistic side of relationships, she ends up giving us the better movie scenes that she's capable of, even though every single one of them makes me feel like shit while watching it. Like, one scene that really stood out to me in Materialists specifically is when 2 characters decide to go crash a wedding, and you can hear Dakota Johnson giving a live commentary about how she thinks the marriage of the couple being married is going to end up playing out over the span of a few more years. And I think that scene is the perfect embodiment of how a Celine Song movie makes me feel up until this point. There's just like this underlying theme of being skeptical about relationships and just really hoping you're making the right choice for yourself in the long term. And I think that's something a lot of people could relate to. And I like how she never really gives you a defined stance by the end of the movie. Like, this one, more so than Past Lives, has a specific ending that feels a more specific emotion, but I still don't fully buy it, and I think that might be the intention behind it. And I think the sign of a good movie is one that makes you think long after you watch it. I've been thinking about Past Lives for years now, and Materialist has been on my mind since I've seen it. So to me, Celine Song is 2 for 2 so far. And a lot of people are complaining about this movie because they say it's not funny. And I agree in the sense that there aren't a lot of jokes in the movie, but I'm also somebody that judges films on what the film actually is versus what I want it to be. movie. Like, I'm not gonna walk out Schindler's List to complain because they didn't fight Thanos at the end of it. If Materialists was trying really hard to actually be a 2000s rom-com, then yeah, I would complain that it's not that funny. And I would say it would fail at being that kind of movie. There are not a lot of jokes here, but when they are in the movie, I think they're still pretty funny. Like, I laughed a couple of times out loud in a movie, and I can't say that about every single thing that comes out in this decade. And I think what we got is a much more interesting movie than just a regular rom-com. They have their time and place for sure, but if Ari Aster is out here making elevated horror movies like Hereditary and Midsommar, then I'm super down for elevated rom-coms, because if that's what this is, I really like it. In terms of performances, these are three actors that I do think are really talented. They just have to be in a very specific role, because some actors are so good at switching characters off and on like nothing. They could play literally any type of role. And then there are some actors that are just really good at playing a very specific stereotypical character. And I think that's not a problem. I don't need Mike Myers playing Jordan Belfort, and I don't need Leonardo DiCaprio playing the Cat in the Hat. They're both good actors. They both do their own thing. Dakota Johnson is an actress that gets shit on a lot, especially recently with the whole Madam Web situation. But I think she was the perfect fit for this character. She has a robotic style to her. I'm not trying to say that in a bad way. I'm just saying, in a scenario like this where she's dealing with a very emotional workspace, she's really good at just being the stone cold objective person in that. But at the same time, when she does want you to feel something, she's good at that too. I just don't think she's had a lot of good roles to showcase that. And I think out of the three main stars, if we were forced to recast two of them, she would be the one I would keep. I thought she was really great in this. That being said though, Pedro Pascal feels well cast for the first time in a while for me. I know people are starting to get sick of him. Even my dad the other day, we were talking and he was like, aren't you tired of Pedro Pascal by this point? And to me, there's always going to be one actor at a very specific time that just feels like they're getting all of the major roles because they are talented and it is their time to cash in while they can. I mean, it feels like literally yesterday it was Tom Hardy, Benedict Cumberbatch, or Chris Pratt leading every single major movie. And now it's just Pedro Pascal's turn. And I really do like Pedro Pascal. I just think he hasn't been cast in the best roles recently. Like, the first thing that comes to mind is Gladiator 2. I thought he was horribly miscast there. But in Materialists, he fits the bill. I think he's kind of similar to a Ryan Gosling in the sense that they're both really good at playing that stoic, main, quieter character. And I hope when he's done with the Mandalorian and Grogu trilogy and 17 more Marvel movies, he actually goes back to some of those roles. And speaking of people that have made 17 Marvel movies, Chris Evans is also in this. And I think he's a better actor than most people give him credit for. It's just his agent puts him in the worst fucking movies in Hollywood besides being Captain America. But he was really good in his little amount of screen time in Scott Pilgrim. And once I saw him in Knives Out, I was like, okay, Chris Evans is that guy if you just give him the right material. And I thought he was pretty good in this movie. He didn't blow me away by any means. There were a couple times where I was like, okay, this is just Chris Evans. But I do think if he plays his cards right, he's going to have a much different career than the past decade of being Captain America and the action movie guy. I think he is really talented, and I want to see more directors take advantage of that. And I'm excited to see what his career looks like 10 years from now. But now I want to get into the things I didn't really love about Materialists. It's the few things that made me go like, man, this movie was almost as good as Past Lives, but it's just not there for me. And there are two main issues I have with the movie. One of them, the internet absolutely hates, and I'm more mixed on. And then the other one is something I hate when any writer does. And even if it's Celine Song, somebody that I think is very talented at writing, I feel like I still have to call out or I'd be hypocritical. But let's talk about the thing I'm mixed on first, which I would consider to be a spoiler. I think a lot of people that are watching this video have either seen the movie or don't care about the spoiler. But I would say if you are very interested in this movie, I would come back to this video because I do think the reveal of it is something that will be a lot more of a gut punch if you don't know about it going into the movie. But a lot of people are already talking about it in their videos and not giving any spoiler warning. So I'm just going to go in and talk about it right now because there is a subplot of the movie that revolves around a sexual assault case. And there are like two camps of people complaining about this. One camp is like, that came out of nowhere. And then the other camp is like, this doesn't belong in a rom-com. To the second statement, I once again say, this is not a rom-com. And that is kind of on the marketing. Like, if it really made it seem like it was a rom-com and a lot of people bought a ticket trying to go in to laugh and then they get triggered from watching this, this, I understand that is a valid complaint, but anybody that walks out of this movie saying that subplot comes out of nowhere truly didn't understand the entire point of the movie. The entire theme of the film is that we as humans care more about your stat points as an individual rather than the actual human being that you are. That's all we care about. And the fact that somebody's job is to know everything about somebody and miss that major detail and then set them up in an intimate setting with another person they are also supposed to know everything about is truly insane. It speaks volumes today about where we are as a society, and I think it's handled so well here. And the only reason I'm mixed on it is because I think it absolutely deserves to be in the movie, but there becomes a point where Chris Evans and Dakota Johnson are fighting kind of about where are we? What are we? And then all of a sudden the victim calls Dakota Johnson and then they have to just get in the car and go back to New York City. Like the way they handled all of that kind of bothered me a little bit. In that moment, it just felt like a plot device versus an important part of the plot. And I didn't really like that. I think you still could have had that scene in the movie of him being outside of the apartment. It's just the whole way it comes together really did not work for me. And when it comes to the other complaint I have about this film, even though I praised the writing earlier in this video, and I 100% stand by that, there are a couple of callbacks in this movie that just infuriated me. It just felt like, why are we dumbing down this audience? Like in the beginning where the first two people that got married are these cave people, we didn't need anybody explaining the cave people by the end of the movie. We should know and get the gist of what they are trying to say. And then you have the talk of the surgery earlier on in the movie where Dakota Johnson is outside talking to one of her coworkers. Like that part of the conversation was interesting and funny, but then the fact that Pedro Pascal's character actually went through that surgery and it shows up like an hour later into the movie, I thought was really lame. To me, it's like pick or choose. Either have the girl bring it up in the conversation and change something else about Pedro Pascal's character, or just don't have her bring it up and just let that surgery thing be its own scene later on in the movie without any explanation earlier on. I do love the moment where Pedro Pascal shrinks himself down. I think that's a great way to visually represent the problem with judging people. And if that's the case, I would have just kept that scene as it was and deleted that part of the conversation with the coworker earlier on in the movie. I also just love the first hour or so of this entire film, and I really like the rest of it. And I know that's not really a complaint, but I do think if that second half was consistently on the level of the first, I would think this is just as good as Past Lives. I just think when we're looking at the world of dating through the perspective of Lucy, we get the most interesting scenes and exchanges between characters. And by the time that part of the story is over and it's more focused on who is she gonna date by the end of the movie, I just didn't care about the characters as much as I did in something like Past Lives. And in Materialist defense, I don't think Celine Song is trying to do the same exact thing here. I just think she's trying to dissect relationships in two very different ways. And Past Lives is still a movie I feel like I could recommend to virtually anybody and they would enjoy it. And I don't think I can necessarily do the same thing with Materialists. I think some older generations might lose a little bit of the things that Materialist goes for because it has a very specific modern touch to how it handles modern dating. But I still think there's enough in Materialists where a lot of people will still enjoy it. I get if you wanted a rom-com, this is not a rom-com, and yeah, that would probably piss me off if I had that expectation. But at the same time, I think you have to review the movie as the movie it is, and I think Materialist is a damn good one. I think Celine Song is one of the most interesting filmmakers we have right now. I am so excited to see what she does with her third movie. And besides one film I saw at Sundance this year, this is by far my favorite movie of 2025. I'd highly recommend going to the theater if you can, or renting it when it comes out on Amazon or whatever you stream from. And if you want to know what that movie from Sundance was that I think is even better than Materialist, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that review coming up soon.